welcome to St. Thomas More College. My name is Gertrude Rompré, and I serve here as the Director of Mission and Ministry and the co-director of the Irene and Doug Schmeiser Center for Faith, Reason, Peace, and Justice. And so we've been involved in helping organize this event tonight, along with the Prairie Centre for Ecumenism. I offer also a special welcome to all of those of you across the country who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. The last count was there were 272 people registered, and knowing that some of those registrations were actually congregations that were gathering to share this event this evening. So we are really a lovely community gathered. Yes, worth applauding. So we are gathered here this evening on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. And it is this treaty relationship that directly inspires this evening's conversation as we look at the intersections between the work of ecumenism and the work of reconciling peoples. May our encounter this evening further incarnate the relationships to which we aspire as treaty peoples from our respective territories. This is the 9th time we have gathered around the Margerie Ecumenical Lecture. The Margerie Lecture series was initially established as a collaboration between the Roman Catholic Diocese of Saskatoon, the Prairie Centre for Ecumenism, and St. Thomas More College to celebrate global ecumenical leaders and welcome them to our prairie soil. It is named, of course, in honor of Father Bernard de Margerie, our friend and an ecumenical pioneer here in Saskatoon since the Second Vatican Council. And please, yes. And of course, we welcome Father Bernard here among us this evening. Thank you for being with us. So in the spirit of Father Bernard's service, this lecture series has brought together ecumenical wisdom from various parts of the planet. But this year, we are hearing voices that come from closer to home. And rather than a more traditional lecture, we have invited 2 church leaders to engage in dialogue. We will give the opportunity for our presenters to have a conversation, and then we will offer an opportunity for the audience, whether you're here in person or via the YouTube chat, to engage in a conversation with them. I'll be back at the podium along with my co-director Chris after the initial dialogue to help moderate that part of the conversation. But at this time, however, I would like to call upon Ms. Celeste Walaschuk, member of our campus ministry team, to introduce our speakers and to launch this evening's dialogue. Again, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Rompré said, my name is Celeste Walaschuk. I am a member of the campus ministry team here at St. Thomas More College, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our partners in dialogue this evening. First, we have Bishop Christopher Harper. The Right Reverend Christopher Harper is the 13th Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Saskatoon. He has served as bishop since November 2018. Saskatchewan-born, he hails originally from Onion Lake Cree Nation. A graduate of Toronto School of Theology, Wycliffe College, his parish ministries have included time on reserve, off reserve, and in shared ministry with the Lutheran ELCIC, the largest parish being 3 main and 6 part-time churches overseeing 10 communities. His priestly ministries were in the Diocese of Saskatchewan, the Diocese of Algoma, and the Diocese of Toronto as the Indigenous Native Priest with Toronto Urban Native Ministry. Bishop Chris has worked on many committees in the church, the ACC, Council of the General Synod, the General Synod Planning Committee, Provincial Synod, diocesan executives in Saskatchewan and Algoma, as well as with ecumenical and interfaith ministries, and is a past member of the Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples and the Anglican Indigenous Network. Bishop Chris has traveled widely and now happily calls Saskatoon home, where he lives with his wife of 40 years, Tracy. Together, they have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Bishop Chris. Our second bishop of the evening, Archbishop Donald. The Most Reverend Donald Bolin is the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Regina. He was born and grew up in Gravelbourg, Saskatchewan. His family is of German ancestry and have lived in what is now called Saskatchewan since the 1880s and 90s. He studied in Regina, Ottawa, and Oxford, and after ordination, taught in the Religious Studies Department at Campion College at the University of Regina and engaged in parish ministry. In 2001, he was appointed to work at the Vatican's Pontifical Council for the Promotion of Christian Unity. In that capacity, he had the opportunity to serve the Catholic Church's international dialogues with Anglicans and Methodists. He was named the Bishop of the Diocese of Saskatoon in 2010 and served here for 6.5 years. Don has been the Archbishop of Regina since October 2016. Within the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops, he has been active in ecumenical and justice work. He remains a member of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity and co-chairs the International Anglican Roman Catholic Commission for Unity and Mission. On both diocesan and national levels, he has been actively involved in Indigenous relations and responding to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Please join me in welcoming Archbishop Don. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
So, Bishop Chris, I think you're going to lead us in a little prayer?
Yes. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Creator God, we give you thanks and praise for the day that you've given to us. We thank you for the moment in time that we now gather here in this circle. We thank you for the opportunity to listen, to hear, and to come together with open hearts and minds, that we, listening and walking with each other, may take one brave step forward in recognizing our place, our role, our ministry in creation. Be with us now, especially through this conversation. Be with all those at home in their needs and their struggles. Be with us as we talk about what leadership can and should be doing. Be with us now. May your Spirit abide with us, walk with us, strengthen and encourage us, and accept all that we offer you this day. And this we pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introductions and the welcome. It's very good to be here with all of you this evening. It's very good to be here with you, Bishop Chris. It's an honor to take any part in a Margerie Lecture series. Father Bernard is and was for me a mentor, a friend, a confessor, a spiritual guide, and certainly an ecumenical pioneer. So grateful to have you here, Bernard. So Chris and I had a couple of conversations leading up to it, and the only notes I'm going to use are in the next 3 minutes, because this is a dialogue, a conversation. It's not a scripted conversation, and there isn't much planned. But a few opening words. Both in Anglican Roman Catholic relationship and in the relationship between Christian churches and Indigenous peoples today, we use the metaphor walking together, and we use that metaphor often. In the Catholic Church right now, we're going through a process of preparing for a synod on synodality, which really means walking together. It is a pivotal metaphor for us, and it brings together two conversations that I think we're going to have this evening. It's a beautiful thing, I think, that we're able to have this conversation together in a public way. So when our churches first arrived on this land, Anglican and Roman Catholic bishops did not sit down to have friendly conversations in the public domain to ask what they could do together and what they could learn together. In fact, relations were very tense, and that had a negative impact on Indigenous peoples as well. So this is an opportunity and a gift that comes with this moment. So I guess I've got 4 little signposts that I just put out there at the start of this evening, things that we might touch on. First of all, what would it mean for Anglicans and Roman Catholics to walk together in a good way today? I think we already do some of that, but I think there's a lot of potential for us to do more. What would it mean for us, separately and together, to walk together with Indigenous peoples in a good way? What should we be doing together? The famous ecumenical principle, the Lund principle from 1952, says that Christian churches should do all things together except where deep differences require that we act separately. And over 50 plus years of dialogue, Anglicans and Roman Catholics hold so much together. But that hasn't necessarily been translated on the ground to doing all the things that we could do together. So just put that out there, and especially in strengthening relations with Indigenous peoples, what can we be doing together? And finally, what should we be learning from each other? And I ask this specifically from a Roman Catholic perspective because I know that the Anglican Church in Canada has taken some profound and significant steps in terms of fostering closer relations with Indigenous peoples. And the Catholic Church has a lot to learn from the Anglican Church in Canada in that regard. So what should we be learning from you, and what can we learn from each other? So those are 4 little signposts that I just put out at the start of the dialogue, and there's no one I'd rather have this conversation with, and just leave it over. Where do you want to start?
Well, when we started these conversations, I think we wanted to try to make it as fluid as possible, and as inviting you into the living room to listen in on conversation. Conversations that, as my dear brother said, is that we, these conversations, especially between an Anglican and Roman Catholic, have been going on for 50 years. How long does the conversation have to go on before anyone listens? So I fully understand the politics of it, but at the same time, meanwhile, things are happening in our world, which we all have to agree and acknowledge, have opened our eyes, shaken us to the very foundation of who we are as Christians. We've from the start in the findings of the 215, to the 169 as of late. How do we respond? How should we be responding? And as I have been in my conversations have been stating, is that this is not a denominational issue, it is a Christian issue. Where we as Christians need to recognize that we need to honor, listen, respect, and acknowledge the other in the family around us. Archbishop Mark MacDonald, our Indigenous Archbishop, he always starts conversations with a wording like this: I welcome all of you, my relatives. I welcome you to the circle of conversation, to come to listen, to come to bring yourself into the story and become part of the story and to share with each other the stories. And some people have taken that so for example, when we try to find out who we are by identifying who we are, First Nations, Indigenous, Native American, it goes on and on, infinitum. That oftentimes when we use First Nations and when it's termed, as it's stated, I welcome you, my relatives, some people have taken that and turned it, twisted it, bent it just a little bit to say, well, then we're all First Nations. Well, we've had even statements in the state saying that, we're a treaty people. But what does it mean? And sometimes it gets back down to the basics of language, of how we say things and the way we do things. And that's why the church right now, whether it be Anglican, Roman Catholic, Lutheran, and I can go on, all the denominations, each and every one of us as Christians need to start to listen. We need to hear. We need to acknowledge. I've heard it from clergy who have said, well, we don't have those issues because we don't have Native people in our areas. I'm going, have you looked? And we're there. We're there. And even for myself, this is one of the things that I've made an overt statement in the simple thing that I live with every day. And that is, so I'm going to do a little bit of salesmanship right now. My cousin made this beautiful vest for me. And I wanted to, this is my first time in being able to wear it. And so I wanted to, share with this with everybody, to wear the colors, especially for Saskatchewan, using the blue instead of the black. But here's a question for all of you. How many of you know what the colors mean? I was hoping for one hand at least. Oh, there, God bless you. You get a hug later on, whether you like it or not. But the reality is when you have the yellow, the black, the red, the white, it is about all the nations of the world. It's about all the nations, all in one. We use it in the medicine wheel. We use it in that wonderful wheel that shows all of humanity in that beautiful circle. And the colors separate the four quadrants. It also indicates the seasons of the year. It indicates the ages and stages of life from infancy going right to the senior, the elder. It gives you everything in there, but at the very center of it is a cross. And that cross is there to remind everyone that the Creator is with us in all our journeys. And that's one of the reasons that in our conversations of what we wanted to bring forward was to invite you within that circle so that you too can find that place where the Creator invites you in to say, welcome, child. Welcome, you child of creation. And to acknowledge your brothers and sisters, your relatives. It's not a way of saying that, that negates you from acknowledging others, but instead it is part of that invitation to welcome you no matter where you are in the journey of life, from infancy all the way around back to being an elder and a senior. It invites you in with a circle, and there, that is where the Creator is. And so this is what we wanted to try to do, was to try to bring this conversation about what can we do better as leaders within the church. What can we do better? Oh, I'm getting relaxed, obviously. I'm hoping you laugh in church too, because it's important to recognize that the good news of Jesus Christ is there. That is the hope. And that is the hope that we need to bring into the world more so now than ever before. Because with such pain, brokenness, from the findings of the 215 and up, and across this land, it's been one of those moments that I say that, it's not, this is a Canadian issue also, to acknowledge the history. And when we talk about decolonizing the church, the institutions, when we take the small steps, and I say they're small steps because the acknowledgement is a wonderful first step, but it's a baby step. The huge step is when you start to make movements of your own. You know, I remember when the acknowledgements first came out, everybody was doing it. Then after that, it was only once every other week in the church. And then after that, once a month. Well, it's on the bulletins, so we don't have to say it anymore. So we've changed. We start to lose the significance of what the moments are and what we're here for, and that is to learn from each other, to walk with each other. And understanding that who we are as a people of faith and what the church can be is now more significant than ever before. COVID, or as I've been terming it, COVID tide, the season of COVID, has given us an opportunity to put brakes on. It's given us a moment in time to reflect, to sit down, to look in the mirror, look within in the hearts. It's given us this opportunity to start thinking about what we really truly need. And at the same time, that which is around us, which we've taken for granted. So whether it be just the ability to be able to sit and talk with each other. We've done it a few times on flat screens. We joked just before we got together here this evening, we went for a dinner.
He's real.
I touched him and you're real. Because it's been since the last time we've had our LUARC meetings that, we were all together. And that's been over a year and a half now. But for us to be able to sit down, to talk, to share, and to walk again with each other, I think is so significant. Not only for the church, or churches, but for all of us as Canadians. It's a start.
Yeah. So when you talk about the truth and reconciliation work and grave sites and ground penetrating radar and saying we're all involved in this, I'm mindful of a story that Anglican priest that we both know from Edmonton, Scott Sharman, tells that in the context of the Edmonton TRC event, he was one of the church volunteers, so that if a survivor wished to come and meet with a church person, they could. And so he was in the room, and he was wearing a black clergy shirt and didn't identify a denomination. And an older gentleman came and said to him, "I really need to tell you that I'm not afraid of you anymore. I went to a Catholic school. I suffered a lot there. I was intimidated there, and I've dealt with it, and I've found my own spiritual resources and traditions, and I need you to know that." And Scott said, "I hear you, and I received that. I just need to tell you that I'm not a Roman Catholic priest, I'm an Anglican priest." And the fellow reacted with vigor. "Anglican, Catholic, it's all the same. And maybe if you guys are seeking reconciliation with us, you should get reconciled yourselves." And that's it's a moving story. It's funny, but it's true, right? That we need to be in dialogue with each other on this walk of reconciliation. And so there's a kind of a double witness and a double conversation going on, which you carry within yourself. So when you talk about the importance of acknowledging and acknowledgements, I'm thinking in a slightly different way, because in the Catholic Church, in the Roman Catholic Church, the last decades, the whole TRC process challenged the narrative that Roman Catholics had about the residential schools. And when we heard the waves of suffering that so many Indigenous people experienced in residential schools, and such a variety of kinds of suffering, that Indigenous people lost language, culture, traditions, spirituality, family bonds, right? In addition to the kinds of abuse they suffered. The Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, has has needed to acknowledge that experience of suffering. Many Indigenous people are not uniform, right? Experience residential schools in various ways, but those waves of suffering that the TRC related and recorded and gave voice to have required that we acknowledge a different narrative, and that's been a challenge. And so listening to survivors has been instrumental in summoning us to conversion, to a change, and we're on the road in that regard, and people are to varying degrees patient or impatient with us along that way. It's interesting that when the delegation of Indigenous peoples head to Rome in 11 days now, the goal for Pope Francis is really to listen to those voices and to those experiences, and to do what is requested of him, which is most fundamentally to engage with their stories and to respond accordingly. So.
I think that is one of the hardest things for us to do is to listen, to acknowledge, to hear the story of the other, especially among the Indigenous circles of the peoples themselves. The experiences, as you said, are wide and varied, and at the same time, we've now come to a reality check where we're as Indigenous people, we're striving, struggling to find ourselves and our own identity. And what does that mean, to find our own identity? Is that to recognize of who and what we are? You know, we've been told for so long about what we should be that we need to remember who we are and where we come from. That's one of the reasons that, you know, for myself, you know, for me it was easy. It was an easy start. You know, as the Indigenous Native priest for the Diocese of Toronto, I needed to put on a new uniform. And part of that new uniform was to again grow my hair. And because you know, as a parish priest, you know, you have loving parishioners who very much know how much more better that the priest should be and what they need to say and do. And so I've had many parishioners, God bless you if you're listening, and where they told my wife, you better cut his hair, it's getting a little long and shaggy. And to a point now where I wear my hair with pride because it is number one of who I am. I didn't get my first haircut, I think, until I was probably about 9 years old, I think it was. And I remember I used to have braids that went well past my belt. And I remember how traumatic it was for me. And then hearing the stories about the residential schools, you know, I understand the pain, because again, the hair symbolizes your connection to the Creator and creation. And as long as it is, it also tells the story of who you are and where you come from. And when we talk about identity, even with the Indigenous circles, and the way we greet each other is the first things that's usually asked is, who are you related to? And when you get asked that question, you respond in the history of who you are and your people. And when we had the reality of the residential schools, all of that was taken away. And so the struggle began, and this is where we see a lot of this now, where a lot of the Indigenous people do not understand their own traditional ways anymore. They have no identity, and if they have no identity, they're like ghosts on the street. They're lost, wandering, without a place to call home. And we have this struggle to try to bring and to search out and to find a place. The church brought it. The church can be an instrument of healing too. And I think this is what we're trying to do right now in this conversation, is try to recognize that there is an opportunity for hope, healing, reconciliation. But what that means, though, is that the church is willing to step forward to do this. Now, hopefully you are all noticing, I'm not saying Anglican or Roman Catholic, but the church, all denominations, doing this together as Christians so that we can start to bring the love, the hope, the promise, the truth to all peoples, to this world again. But peace, hope, healing, and reconciliation has never been accomplished through an institution. It begins with people, you. All of you online, in your homes. What you teach to your children is that which they take to school and that which they play out. What you say, what you do, and how you bring them up is what they will be in the future. Copies of you. Lord have mercy on us all. But the truth is that we have this opportunity in this moment to make change and to be change. And this is why I think right now we are in the right season to do this. To sit, to listen, to talk with each other, to share our stories, and to bring who we are in our identity. I'm now, oh goodness sakes, I can never remember how old I am. Old enough to forget, I guess. But I come to this realization, I've been fighting all my life with who and what I am. And I've found that people are more than happy to tell me where to go. I'm glad some of you got the joke. But they're more than willing to teach me and to tell me of what I need to be. I'm finally getting to a stage in my life where I'm comfortable with myself. It's been a long journey, a long struggle. And I invite all of you, my brother, to walk with us, to walk with me through this time. It's going to be a constant uphill struggle sometimes. Sometimes it means finding a new language. We talked about that as we were coming down here, about the differences in language. For example, in Plains Cree, Tansikia. In other words, how are you doing? Not just hello, and don't expect an answer, right? You know how it is. Jim, how are you doing? Hey, keep on walking. You don't even talk to, oh, nice to see you, Bill. Boy, my lumbago. Hold on, just my lumbago is bothering me. My sciatica has been. They don't want to hear. But in Cree, Dansekia, how are you doing? Your mind, your spirit, your body. And it takes time. And that's why I'm hoping if I can push one thing upon you is patience. Be patient. We'll get there. Someday, maybe not in our lifetime, but in our children and their children, where they will be able to still play in the playground, or they'll be able to be in a workshop and treat each other like we used to do when we were kids. Didn't see race. We just saw somebody that said, hey, you got a baseball? I've got a bat at home. Let's play. Bring your gloves, everyone. We need to get back to that again, to be children of God and the creation. Like I said, it's easy for me to take over these kinds of things. So, my dear brother, No, please. But like I said, for us right now, we have this wonderful opportunity, and I'm praying that we all see that this is an opportunity for us to learn from each other and to grow. Mm-hmm. And that reconciliation is real. But it's more than just the church. It's more than the institution. It's people as Canadians. Mm. I can't tell you, even to this day, and yes, even wearing the purple shirt, where I still get called down. I still get followed in the stores. My wife gets upset sometimes, and we learn to bite our tongues, not to say anything, in the way we're treated. It still happens today. Homelessness is a reality of the church. It's a reality of our community. It's a reality of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. Racism is real. It's in and amongst us. If you can say, I've never heard of it, I've never seen it myself, that's a point of privilege. I live with it every day because of what I look like. It's taken me these many years just to start to become comfortable with who and what I am. It's taken me these many years to struggle to try to prove myself. And yes, I do have to prove myself. I once did a public, event where I spoke about, that, how I've struggled and how I've gone through all of this. I've been, I guess I can say I'm one of the few that I can say, and that's probably because of the past work I did, was that I've been beaten up more than most. I've been spat on, sworn at. I've been threatened. I think I'm probably among the few here that can say I've been shot at. I've had knives pulled on me, and all of this, not only as not just a priest, but before my old. What kind of ministry is he in? But there's the reality. It's there. I'm still old enough to remember, when I first walked in, when I was doing EMS, emergency medical services work, walking in to transfer a patient, and the patient looked at me and said, Indians, Indians, they allow you to drive now? And I said, sir, you'd be shocked at what they let us do. I said, in fact, I'm going to be looking after you all the way to the next hospital. But again, it begins, and we're in a time of change. Things are happening now. If anything, I do want to, but the conversation starts with us, right?
Yeah.
It starts between two people, because we can all say we have the most amazing conversations with myself. Usually I win the argument. But when it's between two people, we can change the world. That's all it takes, is two people to sit and listen to each other with true open hearts and minds. So, but like I said, there's so much to talk about. And, this is just one small, short venue. And I don't know, I think we've been told we have 6 hours. Is that true? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I saw everyone panic at the back there that are controlling things. But like I said, we have so many things to talk about.
Thank you for your courage and for your resilience through all that you've experienced, and for sharing it with us so that we can learn from it. I hear what you say about a search for identity. It's broader than Indigenous people, but we hear and see it. And I also, in the context of one of the committees I'm serving on, working on a document on Indigenous spirituality and working with elders and knowledge keepers in that regard, and so moved by the richness of Indigenous spiritual traditions, most especially the relationship with the land, the reverential relationship with creation, with other creatures, the humility that's built into that relationship with land, with other creatures, with other people, the grandfather teachings, the beautiful ethical values and principles, the understanding of everything connected to the Creator, the integration of a spiritual vision, which is beautiful. So, the churches were a part of taking that from Indigenous peoples. And so one of the questions that we sit with today is, how do we serve as artisans of the recovery of those traditions? And how do we stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples in the rightful pursuit of rights, rights as they're articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, right to self-determination, to self-governance, right to education, to your own spiritual ways, right to dignity as a human person. That document which provides a roadmap, we're not very good at the how. And it's one of the conversations that's coming up in my conversations with leaders from Kisikus First Nation, north of Camp Sac. And they've done a lot of pondering about the how, and we're in learning mode. So you got any ideas in terms of next steps, in terms of how do we as churches assist Indigenous peoples in reclaiming their spiritual heritage, which in so many ways is so consistent with Christian values and Christian worldview.
I think that's one of the things that the Indigenous circles do have a chance to offer back to the church, is the reality of understanding what community means. You know, when I was living on reserve, there was, you know, if anything ever happened, I was in need. I was never alone. I always had relatives, I always had people, acquaintances, friends who were always there to help. My vehicle broke down, everyone had a backyard mechanic that could fix things. Anytime you were hungry, everyone shared with each other. I don't think we ever went hungry on the reserve. You know, miraculously, deer meat, moose meat, you know, always showed up. And all these wonderful opportunities to learn about what community can be again. And that's what the church should be, is community. About all of us walking together, working together, talking with each other, supporting each other, encouraging, outreach programs. But to recognize the deeper relation. You know, there was one beautiful meme that was on Facebook, you know, which sort of symbolized it all. That, you know, in the beginning, we had no hunger. If somebody was hungry, we fed them. We had, if anyone was cold, we always had an extra blanket to share. And when anybody was in need, there was always somebody there to support them. When anybody was hurt, there was always a healer. But then they civilized me, and all of that is gone now. We struggle to try to find out and be reminded of community. Maybe the Indigenous Circle is able to do that, to offer that back to the church, to remind us about what community means. That it's not about us working all our lives to get rich so that we can die and give it to somebody else that's not going to appreciate and spend it all within 2 weeks anyway. But instead, to look out, to truly care for those in need, to truly look out for the person like the Good Samaritan, to reach out, take them up, to bind their wounds, to feed them, to clothe them, and to pay whatever this person needs. When next time I'm in, I'll pay you what is owing. What a different world this would be. But at the same time, what we need to understand from each other is also what it means to be part of a greater family in creation. In creation, because creation offers us this moment in time for all of us to recognize that we are not dominant, that we should not dominate, but instead to be part of. I defy anyone right now to create oxygen. Only plants can do that. I defy anybody to try to find and make medicines from themselves. Nature, creation offers that to us. God calls us to be part of something greater than ourselves. Creation is that. And I think the Native Circle has an opportunity to teach this back to the people. I found very interesting the stories about the first Thanksgiving, and where, you know, the beautiful pictures as it's painted out by, you know, who's that famous artist? Rockwell? Yeah, and the beautiful painting of everybody sitting at the table, and it didn't happen that way. But maybe we can start a brand new story ourselves in this present moment in time, to be able to again bring hope, bring healing, bring reconciliation. But it starts with us, to begin and to make up a new story. One of my prayers, as I've been saying for this last while, and it's, especially more so within the last 2 years, is that as I swing my legs over the bed, I say a quick prayer, and where I say, Lord God, help me to be better today than I was yesterday and the day before. This is my recognition that we all do wrong. But if we humble ourselves before God, the Creator, if we humble ourselves before our brothers and sisters, our relation, all of you, and that we treat each other with respect and dignity, something is going to change. But that first has to change in here, in the self. And then we become to be able to reach out and to reach out our hands, to take the hand of the other and say, walk with me. That's when community starts to happen. That's when healing begins. And I think this is where, again, we have this opportunity to learn. Like I said, there's so many teachings. We touched very quickly about spirituality. And so in my own ways, I've been trying to bring back to the church this wonderful, difficult blending of both Indigenous ways and our Christian ways. I've met with some resistance who, that doesn't work. That's not going to work, But again, it's about how we approach it. The prayer of Salisbury, what was it, 1573? Any historians here? And where the prayer, God be in my head, my thinking. God be in my eyes that I can see clear. God be in my mouth and my speaking that I may speak peace. God be in my heart that I may walk anew in Christ. Be with me in all that I do. The exact prayers that we do as Indigenous Native, as Indigenous Native peoples when we smudge. Now try to tell me that God is not working in the world. If we can say the same prayers from around the world. And so we have an opportunity to learn from each other. So for me, what I've been saying is we use incense, especially, at the Mass when we're sensing the altar, right? I always love the rhythm and the count and everything else. There's something beautiful about it. I love it. Anyway, and the smell of the frankincense and the myrrh and the spices and all the resins and just all the glorious heavenly smoke. My favorite time was when I was not the thurifer, or the incense bearer, but instead as an acolyte, the torch bearer. Why? Because the torch bearer holds the cross, or holds the candle like this, and usually the thurifer is right in the middle, and they're doing this right like this big waft of smoke every time. Oh, I remember walking home after the Eucharist or the Mass, and just you could feel just the beautiful, beautiful smell, in your hair and everywhere about you. Something glorious. The Indigenous people didn't have frankincense and myrrh, but they used the aromatics of the land. And that smell was part of that heavenly smoke that rose up in the symbolism of all our prayers rising up to the heavens. So whether you use incense or whether you use sweetgrass, sage, tobacco, and cedar, they're the incenses that we use. Symbolisms. That's one of the reasons that the Indigenous people understood Christianity, especially the Roman Catholic and later Anglican. is because they understood the use of symbolism. They understood the use of imagery and ritual. All we need to do now is to, part of the reconciliation, is to be able to say that. You know, in the Anglican, we had, you know, Michael Pierce in 1993 to be able to say that apology to the Indigenous people. And his words, which have touched me and stay with me every day, I am sorry. More sorry than words can say of what we have done to your people. We have failed God. We have failed the church. We have failed you. Then in 2019, when we had Fred Hiltz, our primate, our national archbishop, to be able to say the prayers again and again, an apology for spiritual harm. And then in 20 days, for the delegation to go before the Pope, to be able to listen and hear the stories of the people, to hear the stories of the land, is one of those huge steps. Because what it does is, when you listen, you're then invited in to step in the journey. And to be part of the community again. But, like I said, it's easy for me to preach. I'm a preacher at heart. And like I said, I can go for days if you're willing to stay.
Thanks very much for what you share. Very inspiring. I guess on the Catholic side, and being able to join this delegation, we're talking a lot about what happens afterwards. So Pope Francis will come to Canada. But those will be really important steps and really important moments. I hope there will be words said that many people will remember the way that you remember Michael Pierce's words now, which sound as real and alive today as they did then. What comes afterwards, and how can we transition as church to a people that really walk with Indigenous peoples on the ground in the concrete situations of your lives? I know it's one relationship at a time. I heard what you said about institutions, that institutions don't reconcile, people do, families do. Communities do. Anyway, that's foremost on my mind right now is what's going to happen afterwards. What are the steps that we need to take to make it real?
And I think that's one of the reasons that, especially for both of us, we need to acknowledge that words, as has been said many a time, words are like wind. There needs to be action to go along with it. And what that means is that the words themselves, as beautiful as they can be, as a memorial as they can be, it takes action to make change. And only we, you and I, can do that. Just in case you thought this was just about the ones who wear the collar, as uncomfortable as they may be. But it's about all of us. We are the children of creation. And it's up to us now to make that change now. To start looking, to seeing what we can do. More than just words. Boy, that'd be a title for a beautiful song, wouldn't it? More than words. But action as well. And that's why I say, if I can say one thing that with Don and I consider him now a very dear brother. And I make this, if there's any way that I can ever walk with you and stand with you, you just let me know.
Okay.
Because after all, this is what the church was meant to be. I think there's a prayer that was said by someone that we know and love very much that said, Father, as you and I are one, so may they be one with us. Not separate, but one. Understanding each other in how we do things and respecting each other how we do things. I am a Christian first and foremost, but I practice in my tradition as an Anglican, and I practice in my tradition as an Indigenous man. But the first thing we should be saying first is that I am a Christian. What does that mean then? To love, to respect, to honor, to humble ourselves. And amazingly, those are the grandfather teachings of the Indigenous peoples. So, we have a lot to learn from each other. We have a lot of opportunities to walk with each other. We have a lot of opportunities to heal and to reconcile. I think those were wise words when, that maybe, the church should seek reconciliation first with itself. Because it's easy to try to say, I know so much more. But humbleness, humility is that which saying, I know nothing. Teach me. So I like I said, I try to offer these things, and at the same time, just to bring a broader picture into what we call our beloved church. And I believe the church can, and don't be shocked, please don't fall out of your seats, even you at home. I believe the church can change. I believe the church can change. But it starts with us. I got an hallelujah, that's huge. But we can change. And when we start to change, then the world will start to believe us. There was an interesting article I read a short while back that says that most people believe that Christianity is filled with hypocrites. We have an opportunity to correct that assumption. It's up to us. And that's why I say, us walking together, it's an image, it's an opportunity, and at the same time, it's a statement for the world. That I still struggle with it. Please forgive me, my dear brother. 50 years we've been talking, come on.
Well, we've come a fair ways in that 50 years. So
yeah, we've been able to itemize the things we still like to argue about, but that's what family does. But all I'm trying to say is, it's kind of like looking at a menu for way too long. Well, come on,
Yeah.
So, but again, it's up to us.
Yeah.
And I think what we're doing here today is a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And it's a statement not only for the church, but it's a statement to all Canada, a statement to all people that are in need of healing and that are struggling this day. That we have an opportunity for hope, healing, peace, truth. And finally, that beautiful R word, reconciliation. But may it be more than a word, may it be action also.
Hallelujah. Well, thank you very much. I wonder if this is a good moment for us to open the conversation a little wider, since we're getting some spontaneous feedback, that it might be the right moment for us to be spurred on by some comments or questions or reflections from the larger audience who's here in this conversation. So thank you very much for your good words and your good counsel.
Thank you, dear brother. Thank you.
So, hello, I'm Chris Ferenko, who Gertrude mentioned. I'm co-director of the center here. And we also have, in addition to between 123 and 136 people online, good people here who are also invited to ask questions. And James, one of our center assistants, James Powell, will be bringing you the microphone. And if you could try to keep them sort of to questions so that we can maintain the dialogue and not speeches, that'd be awesome. So I'm just looking at things that have been emailed to me and what's going on in the chat, and many positive comments in the chat. And I'm wondering if you, as a first sort of topic of conversation while James is looking for the first question from the audience, if you could go into this dynamic of the tension between reconciliation at the level of institutions and reconciliation at the level of individuals. Maybe if it was you two characters, there'd be no problems, but what about the rest of these?
This is where I get to wonderfully say, Don?
Oh, there you go. Well, the institutions are made of persons, right? I mean, it's not like there is such a thing as an institution without persons. But right relationships aren't only between structured bodies, but between people.
Right.
And yeah, I think I'm deeply grateful for tonight because it is a source of encouragement, and it also models for the people in our churches a way of listening and walking together. But we do need to bring our institutions along with us in that. And yeah, so I mean, it's not a set of opposites. But it begins always with persons, with right relationships, with real relationships. One of our staff people who has been very dedicated to working in this field of reconciliation always preaches to me, you know, it's about relationships. And she'll often say, well, the word reconciliation is a loaded word, but let's talk about right relationships, because that's where it begins.
It's also a noun, and I've been challenging everyone to make it a verb. But just to give you a little bit better idea of what we've been talking about, what we've been planning together, is that we're going to be doing a shared gathering of all the clergy. I'm hoping that I can set it up in May sometime with Wanuskewin, our heritage park that we are blessed with to have here in Saskatoon. And the gathering that we're going to get all the clergy, and I'm going to invite them all to wear their best clergy shirts. Everyone's going to be in black. And you have to understand the church if you don't get the humor on that. But I'm going to invite all the clergy to wear their clericals and to come to the park. And I've asked that there be teachers and speakers there that will speak to them. And we're all going to be mixed up and blended enough so that this way nobody's going to know who an Anglican is, who the Roman Catholic is. But we're in this together. And I've asked that there be speakers, elders, to speak about the history of the Indigenous peoples, the treaties, Treaty 4, Treaty 6, Treaty 7 to the south, Treaty 10, and to talk about what those treaties mean. Then to talk about the language, the differences in the language. I was once at a function where they said, "Oh, you're Indigenous." And I said, "Yes. Can you say something in Indian for me?" And I said, "Well, my Hindi's not too good, but I will try." And so all the languages, how they differ, and at the same time, as the language differs, so do the communities, so do the traditions, the traditions that the people practice. So I'm going to have that. Drummers, I'm going to get them to teach the difference between the ground drum, the big drum, and the small hand drum. The traditions and the different types of songs. And then I'm going to ask that there also be speakers about the language so that this way everyone can learn a word. Because if you learn one word, that's one step in reconciliation. You know, so among our clergy, you know, I've been teaching everybody, for example, danse. Can you say that? Danse. It's a TD, right? A danse. Danse. Danse kia. See, you're already learning. You can change. And that's why I said, that, if you learn a word, it's a beginning of change. It's a beginning of walking anew. And so that's why, so they're going to be speaking about the language. They're going to be speaking about the history. They're going to be speaking about the drums, the different types of dances that are there. And in the end, so much so that the clergy themselves can actually be brave enough and strengthened enough to go to a powwow and not feel intimidated. And then they're being taught, become teachers, and they can teach their own people. This is how reconciliation works. One step at a time. And so we're going to be doing this together, and I'm hoping that we can do it in May. And we're going to open up the invitation for all the clergy to still gather. And I'm hoping that, as time progresses, that we'll be able to do it without masks. Be able to see a true smile instead of the smile of the eyes, but a true smile. And at the same time, to be able to talk with each other and, and bless each other. But again, when we talk about reconciliation, this is it. Small steps. We're doing it.
Yes, thank you. During your speaking, you have mentioned that we should talk, share, walk, show patience. And to me, that also means when we take it a step further, that it's not up to us, the traditional white folk in our traditional congregations, to fix things. Not to tell people, not to tell our Indigenous people how they should do something, and to be able to give support without conditions. We've tried to run the show a lot in the past, and we made some huge mistakes. So I think we need to realize as we do that, we are not to judge, walk, listen, share, but let them run the show, or lead, help them, or have them lead us. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Because I think that's one of the things that if you ever try to realize it, especially when you work food kitchens and everything else like that, if you have, a fancy, spicy meals and everything else like that, they need the basics because that's what they're used to. But that means inviting them in to look at the menu. That means inviting them in to tell what they would love to eat. Believe it or not, for me, one of my favorite meals is hamburger soup. Whenever I go home, that's one of the first things I ask for from my relatives is hamburger soup. Or else, if not that, duck soup. I haven't had that for over 8 years. Duck soup, my goodness. But again, I just ate, so. But again, like I said, it is about us listening to the other. And I think that's very, very important. Because we have got it wrong. We have made the mistakes. Mm-hmm. And we have offended.
And we have such an instinct to think that we can solve it ourselves and communicate that response. One of the things I learned on living on 20th Street for a couple of years from Indigenous folks there was nothing about us without us. And how deep that impulse is for church leaders to get together, consult with one person, and then try to come up with a response instead of creating structures where we're listening to survivors, to elders, to knowledge keepers, to youth, every step of the way, and that we don't think we're going to figure it out on our own, but we're going to figure it out together in that conversation and in that listening. But it's just so much easier said than done, right?
And sometimes we make the mistake too that we allow. I used to say this in my own parishes, that as long as the cross stays on the altar, I know where my faith comes from in all the things that we do. It has not yet been replaced with a dollar sign. We limit things by how much it costs. And I think that's one of the problems. I'm not saying going out by lobster and stuff like that, but for outreach programs. But to realize that the outreach programs, they need as well as much support as we do for all the other things we do within the church itself. So, again, like I said, it's our priorities. we need to examine them.
Thank you very much. So part of the comments that are going on is there's folks from other denominations are also interested in tagging along in May, so you can think about how that would work with mixing up, etc. But I think one of the things that a lot of people were drawn to is this call that you've made to action, that reconciliation, as you say, should be a verb. So you've described this idea for May, but can you talk about other projects, maybe ones moving then beyond the clergy, that people can cooperate on together ecumenically to heal what is also a Christian problem?
This is very good to say. Don?
Well, I mean, so as we, as dioceses and eparchies across the country made a commitment, a financial commitment, the bigger challenge is, what do we do with that? And so there are 25 First Nations communities within the territory of the Archdiocese of Regina. And if we enter into that conversation not knowing what we should be doing, but knowing that we need to find a way to engage each one of those communities, elders and survivors in those communities, in a conversation to figure out what to do. I mean, that's, I think it's, everybody says, and I agree, you know, apologies are a first step which needs to lead to action. But it's not like the church can sit back and figure out what the action is and then carry it out, right? It's that the church then needs to find ways to enter into dialogue and to listen, and then to figure out what the action is called for. I see my Presbyterian friend nodding, and we're working with one First Nation, Anglican, United Church, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic church leaders working with a group of elders, trying to figure out what we can do to help. And we as church leaders, you know, we want to move to action, but we don't have answers. We have a receptivity, and I think that's a slow process.
That's it, yeah.
But it builds relationships along the way. So, I mean, I think moving to action it's easy to say, but it's a slow process if we don't know at the outset what those actions are that are needed, but that go the long way of real listening and conversation. So.
Yeah, and it's all part of listening again, you know, like nobody goes on a holidays without a plan. You know, get everyone together, get in the car, we're all going on a holiday. Great, where are we going? I have no idea. Dad, we don't trust you then. But instead, to be able to listen to what everybody wants and what is needed in the communities, especially for the reserves, because reserves differ from reserve in the sense that either, you know, how financially sound they are and some of the pressing needs that they have, whether they're a huge reserve, small reserve. But right now, the biggest thing is everybody needs healing. Mm-hmm. The cities, Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, need healing. All of us need healing. And this is something that the church, all churches, all denominations can bring to the table. This is what we're here for. This is what we're called to do. Each and every one of us should be having a collar on, because this is our ministry. You know, just for all, you know, when you mentioned that Chris, beautiful name, by the way, that that there's other denominations. If anybody, any minister wants to come in with us when we do this in May at Wanuskewin, just let me know. Send me an email. My email is incredibly difficult. It's bishopchris@sastel.net. No numbers, no wingdings, nothing. But again, so like, you know, the invitation is there for everybody. I'm hoping that we will have more, that it'll take more than just a day. That there'll be so many ministers, pastors, priests, that we'll have to schedule a couple days. This is reconciliation in action. It's not just words.
I think Amanda.
Thank you. It's been so good to listen in your conversation and be part of the circle. And I was just itching to comment on so many of the things you've been talking about. In particular, Chris, when you were talking about the apologies or confessions made by leaders in your denomination, I was having flashbacks to reading aloud the confession of the Presbyterian Church in Canada on the 25th anniversary since we made it first in 1994. Yes. But on that anniversary, I read it and how difficult that was, and also how important it was to move to action. And my question relates to, I've been thinking a lot and having a lot of conversations recently about the idea of decolonization. And I'm thinking about the decolonization of the churches. And I'm thinking about the Indigenous leadership within our churches, and the Indigenous leadership in the Presbyterian Church in Canada are wonderful, amazing leaders, and I've learned so much about Indigenous spirituality and about different ways. And we're starting to take really small steps in terms of what about the church needs to change to really learn from the Indigenous members of our church, from their spirituality and their practices and their circles and their listening. And recently I had a conversation with one Indigenous leader where she talked about the fact that the way we elect elders in our congregations, we have Presbyterian elders just like Indigenous elders, not exactly the same, but same word. And she said, the way we do it and the options for how to do it in our book of forms with all these rules, it doesn't work for us in our Indigenous congregations. So we need to change that. So how do we get to changing that? Okay, so long introduction. I'm wondering from the Anglican experience of Indigenous people within the church, and you've made huge changes in the last number of years, done all kinds of new things. What you might say has really worked well in terms of how that journey has been going, and maybe there's some things that we and Catholics and others might learn from your experience of the church beginning to change.
Absolutely. In the thoughts of decolonizing the institution or the church, I remember when I was in seminary, and I remember, so this is within the last 20 years, but in seminary, I remember going to one of my friends' ordination into the priesthood, and there they had one of the elders come in there to smudge, and he smudged as he does before any ceremony, and they had an honor song sung with a drummer, and this was in the church, and I remember I cried, because I never thought I would ever in my lifetime see or hear or smell that in a church. And from that point on, that motivated me to start to teach. If I don't teach about what I know, if I don't teach, that's my failing. But if I don't teach, then you will never know. The church will never know. And decolonizing means then just to be open, to listen, to hear, to smell, and to be participant in ritual and ceremony that the Indigenous people do have, and what they can offer back. I spoke about smudging, and I spoke about sensing, that we use as as a thurifer, those beautiful words for those that carry the incense. Thank you. But there's so many other things that we can be doing, small steps. And that's part of learning. We see it now that's starting to change in the curriculums within the schools, curriculums within the universities that are saying that you need to have at least one Indigenous course to understand who the people are. Going from the West Coast, from the Haida, the Salish, going right back to the East Coast, the Mi'kmaq, up to the Innu. And at the same time to understand about what the residential school and what happened and how it happened. It's a sad state that we live in a world where we have such short-term memories, where we are now in a time and a stage where that there's even questions now to whether it even happened about the Holocaust. And I'm going, what? but at the same time, what happened with the Indigenous peoples too. So there's so much to learn, and it's all part of that decolonizing, you might as well say, mentality, and that means opening up to new steps. But like I said, after I smelt the sweet grass in the church, oh, wow. I felt at home now. That's the first step, isn't it?
Okay, so thank you. For the next question, this isn't just a question for Archbishop Don, but it's just to highlight something that he said and then to ask about how it's also an ecumenical moment. So Bishop Don said tonight, Pope Francis will come to Canada. This will be a reconciliation moment. This will be perhaps a peace-building trip. And you also identified, Archbishop Don, what happens next is crucial. And so I guess we're wondering what's that ecumenical next moment after Francis leaves and performs this important symbolic peace-building trip? What's next? And I think that's a question for both of you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I don't know. We're trying to figure it out, right? And we're trying to engage in conversations precisely to discern that together. We are in conversations with, I mean, I think it, you know, somehow what happens on a national level and what happens when a pope comes to visit needs to happen in each diocese, needs to happen in each community. One of my brother bishops went to a meeting with a group of survivors and elders and said, we want to write you a letter, and what do you want us to say in that letter that would be really helpful? And they said, Bishop, we don't want a letter, we want you to come. You know, we want this conversation, we want this engagement. We're not really keen on more documents. And so how does that translate into relationship building in each place, with each First Nation community, with the Métis community, and in the north with the Inuit? But the question is beautifully asked, how do we do that together? Like it's also an ecumenical task. And if we set out to do that as Roman Catholics and forget about Anglicans, Presbyterians, Lutherans, United Church, Mennonites, Evangelicals, and everybody else, if we don't engage our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters in that regard, then we're doing it in a diminished way, right? We're not doing it, so I mean, I think keeping that Lund principle in the back of our minds as we do that, what steps that we're talking about taking, or that we're walking with Indigenous people in taking, what steps should we be doing together? That's as far as I can go, is asking the question in a good way, and so I resonate and appreciate the question being asked.
Again, yeah, I agree. You know, it's one of those opportunities. I think going forward, it needs to be inclusive of everybody within the you might as well say, the creation story, all of us together. And I think that would show not only the church, not only show the church hierarchy, but it'll also show the world that, you know, as leaders, we are doing exactly what we're called to do, and that is to invite and to listen and to walk with all peoples. Mm-hmm. And, you know, but I think that's also very wise, is that, you know, we don't want more words, especially on paper. We've struggled with those. Yeah. But, you know, let's see it. Let's see it in action. Let's see it together. Hopefully that answers a little bit of the question.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I hope respecting my ancestors and everybody here present by my use of the word. Thank you for letting me speak for a moment. I was raised Catholic, and then I was formed engineer in the scientific paradigm, and that life of the non-Christian worldview led me to an existential crisis. And so I had the need to stop all that projected life that I have and to come back into my faith. And so that gives me one concern. I guess first I would need to talk a little bit quickly about that concern is Jesus of Nazareth taught a lot about love, but also about being critical about what's kind of the enemies of social well-being or the human well-being, and those being emptiness and what could call it nihilism, like the enemies of actual unity and being in one with him, right? So my concern is how these the question is how can we as Christians can start talking and reconciling in terms of our faith, because I feel that sometimes I felt forced into seeing my Christian faith as myth, when now the way I see it right now as an adult is that what is the myth is the opposite. Like it's the Christ teachings are not a myth. It is the ideation of people that are lost what are myths. So when we as Christians are going to start debating and dealing with our differences from the Christian, like from, let's say, from our tradition, from our categories, instead of the categories that have been proposed by the enemies of faith. Like, because this, the way I see it, we are Canadians. We have diverse backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, but we are that unity. We're Canadians. So I'm a Canadian that has a Mexican background. So I'm going to bring that background here, and I bring it to academia to try to come up with categories, like better ideas, right? I don't want to see myself as a Mexican that has to be listened as a Mexican, and that, see what I mean? When are we going to start being Canadians, talking as Canadians that have different backgrounds and that are trying to reconcile as Christians? That's my question.
Thank you. Can I go first on this one?
Yes.
So, thank you for the question. It's a powerful question. Pope Francis gave in a speech in Brazil, you know, when there are tensions, he always answers the same thing: dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. But dialogue doesn't mean that we set aside our Christian values, our Catholic traditions, our Catholic understanding and formation. Doesn't mean we set aside the Gospels. We bring that with us. But there's nothing Jesus says which suggests we don't enter into a listening posture when we encounter the other. It doesn't mean we set our Catholic vision and values aside, our Christian foundations aside. We bring those, and hopefully they form us, and they form us deeply. But that's not contrary to dialogue and to receptivity of the other. It leads to a rich encounter. An Indigenous person I know here in Saskatoon often said, and I've quoted him many times since, when colonizing powers came to this land, when Christian churches came to this land, there was a possibility of a rich spiritual encounter between them and Indigenous peoples. And for the most part, that didn't happen, but it can still happen today. So don't hear in what I'm saying a kind of a watered down version of Christianity that we're ready to let it all go. We bring the fullness and richness of that tradition, but we also bring it humbly, and we bring it with a receptivity, because we know that the Holy Spirit has been working in other places as well, and we know that we have a lot to learn. So that I hope that sits well together. Confidence in one's tradition, acknowledging its failings, and genuine humility and a listening posture. That's what fosters strong dialogue. Not saying, well, I feel pretty rootless in this. I mean, if you do, fine, you do. But I'm not advocating a letting go of one's tradition. I'm advocating a genuine humility before the other and a readiness to learn and to change at the same time. I hope I understood your question correctly. I'm answering something that I thought was a really good question, but it might not be the one you were asking.
What I think is it's not that I'm saying, I mean, there's native views and Christians are very similar in many ways. Probably more similarities than differences.
Yep.
But I mean, it's not about that. What I mean with that is like these narratives that kind of try to split us. Like because we, especially lay people, we are Christians, Canadians that love each other. So when is that going to be more prevalent? That's when that's
Okay. Right.
Actually, there was two words, receptivity and humility. But I'm also going to throw in one, respect. To respect yourself and the fallibilities, the fragility of our own id, of our ideals, ourself. And to respect that and to recognize that we're all part of that journey. You know, there's, I can say that now just getting, incredibly wise and incredibly long in the tooth. There's others that'll argue with me on that. But anyway, I recognize that there are a lot of things that in the beginning I had no understanding about. And I beat myself up horribly over it. So that's one of the reasons I use the word respect. Respect for yourself, respect for others, and respect that God has a plan and it will be fulfilled. And all you need to do is be patient as God is patient with you, full of grace and mercy, and at the same time willing to put up with all the mistakes that we make. The church is not perfect. If anyone ever comes to the church thinking that it is, I've got news. I've stumbled. I've just about dropped the chalice. I can go on. Why? Because I'm a human being. But still God loves me. And God has called me. And that's all I'm going to say about, especially when we start, if we were to start putting down, laying on the table, and our denominational id, who we are. But first to say that we're Christians, as much as we say that we're Canadians. It would be perfect. We'd be in a better place. Then we would start to be able to treat each other with respect and dignity, honor, respect, everything that goes along with it. Did I say respect? I should say respect a few more times. Because that's the first step of respecting, is the first step of honoring somebody else other than yourself. To respect another is to listen to them, to hear them, willing to walk with them. And so that's why, especially for yourself, the church is only working within the human capabilities that we have in the present. There might be something that you might have to offer the church later on, which is going to be huge. No pressure. But I say this to all of you. I say this to the clergy because I love what they do, because they're doing things that I can't do. As much as the same as you're doing things that I can't do. God bless you. It's a start. Have respect for yourself first. Be patient with yourself. And at the same time, respect and have patience for everybody else. Because I think that's how we'll only move forward. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but thank you.
Okay, so for our last formal question before Gertrude comes back to the podium, I'm going to try to synthesize about 8 questions, so you might pick out only part to answer. In your audience today, you have, both here and virtually, you have educational leaders, you have interested lay folk, you have a good chunk of settlers who have goodwill but don't know where to act. So this concept of showing up, how can settlers show up for reconciliation within this ecumenical context?
That's clearly a question for you.
But it's also a question about, I'm
sorry.
trying to get in that,
Yeah.
you have leaders of institutions here who want to do better, who recognize that they've probably mostly been settler institutions. And with that, I'll leave the podium.
Only a Chris would say that. There's a word we use, and it's called allies. Those who walk with you and they're willing to stand with you. I think allies is probably one of the great strengths that we have an opportunity for. We see that when human beings come together, amazing things can happen, can change. We've seen it happen in amazing ways through the season of COVID, good and bad. We've seen the good and the bad come out in all human beings. I used to joke about, that one time I went and visited some relatives in the United States, if you're listening, and they, when we were in New York, you're Canadian, say something nice.
Hey.
Good day, eh? And they thought it was just that all Canadians are supposed to be super nice. But we proved them wrong, didn't we? Through the season of COVID, we showed the best side of our worst side to the world. But so again, with human beings, it's important to have allies. It's important to have people that are willing to walk with you, listen to you, hear your story, be part of the story, and willing to walk with you and back you up. Hopefully I'm not telling stories out of the past, but or out of turn. But it's always important to have a wingman. It's always important to have somebody there that's willing to back you up through thick and thin. Rather than saying, "Oh, the fight's going to break out," huh? Well, that's on you. But instead, willing to stand up and walk with you in all things. So I think that's why it's important to have that word ally. And what that means in the broadest terms. People who are willing, whether you're part of a circle, whether it be the Indigenous circles, whether I've always been uncomfortable saying settler. Maybe it's just me, but at the same time, the willingness to walk with you, to listen to you, to share with you, to march with you. That's an opportunity. We've learned that very well in COVID. I don't know why, but it allies, and that's why even for us, if I could say one thing is that especially if the Pope does come, invite me and I'll stand with you.
I got it.
But like I said, it's important to have allies that we always walk together. And again, I want to thank everybody, especially at the college here and online, that have listened in, to be able to see that we can laugh with each other, talk with each other, respect each other, humble ourselves with each other, and at the same time be part of a greater story than just ours alone.
Thank you. I would only add, in response to that question, that once you find your way in through relationships, then you don't have enough hours in the day to do the things that are there for you to do. But to get to that place, read the Truth and Reconciliation final report, the 1 volume if you don't want to read the 6, right? Read the calls to action. Think about one call to action that you can act on. When your church puts on an event, puts on the blanket exercise, invites an elder to speak, show up. When somebody invites you to a powwow, say, okay, what do I wear? What do I say? What do I do? But show up, Take first steps. Because once you get to a place where you actually have relationships with Indigenous people who do have ideas for ways in which you can walk together, then you got the other problem of not enough hours in the day. And that's a better problem to have. Right. But it starts with little steps. So thank you so much for being a part of this evening. What a privilege and gift for all of us. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Wood, and I am here to representing the Prairie Centre for Ecumenism. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of the Margerie Lecture series, I'm here to say some thank yous. I would like to first extend our thanks to all of you for participating both in person and over the live stream this evening. It's been a difficult few years, so your constant support is very much appreciated, and it's so nice to see everybody here. It was exciting to hear that there were over 270 registrations for this evening, and that we were able to reach more people beyond the walls, these physical walls, with technology. I understand that there are congregations that are watching the live stream who've invited their neighboring congregations to join them, which is exciting to hear, as it makes it truly an ecumenical experience. I'd also like to extend thanks to the Leslie and Irene Dubé Chair in Catholic Studies, STM, and Gertrude, and all those on the committee for organizing such a meaningful conversation this year. Organizing events such as these always have many, many fine details and are very, very appreciated. And finally, not last but not least at all, to Archbishop Don and to Bishop Chris. I'd like to thank you both for leading us in such an engaging conversation this evening. We are grateful that you were able to join us and share your experiences and journeys towards reconciliation. You have given us hope as we look for new pathways forward, and we have a small token of our appreciation for you this evening. I think I'll carry these up one at a time.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Hamburger soup.
Well, thank you all. It's always at the moment here where you kind of say, we don't want to go home, and I think that's a good sign of the quality of our time together. Thanks again to all of you for being here, and just know that you're welcome to mingle either here, within our COVID protocols, or down the hall and to the right in the atrium. If you would like to continue visiting a bit, you're more than welcome to continue the conversation. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening.